After nearly 4 years, the enemy had surrendered. The war was over. On the U.S. battleship Missouri in Tokyo Bay, early on the morning of September 2nd, 1945, a few hundred U.S. servicemen witnessed the climax of 4 years of war in the Pacific.
It is my earnest hope, and indeed the hope of all mankind, that from this solemn occasion, peace be now restored to the world, and that God will preserve it always. These proceedings are closed.
The formal surrender of the Japanese nation on the deck of the Missouri was followed by other dramatic surrender ceremonies.
At Chuuk, the Japanese commanding officers, General Mugikura and Admiral Chuichi Hara, boarded the USS Portland and signed the document of surrender on the quarterdeck. 4 years of war were ended in a simple ceremony that lasted not much more than an hour. A dozen other surrenders took place on different islands in Micronesia. Now the islands were officially in the hands of the U.S. Islanders, curious but wary, slowly emerged from their hiding places to find out for themselves what they might expect of their new overseers. What they found couldn't have been more Micronesian.
That was the days of plenty, you know. The Americans came in with all kinds of food.
They gave us corned beef, they gave us peanut butter, they gave us biscuit, cheese too, and butter too. But they were good kind. I don't see they sell nowadays. They are really the best kind, really good, yeah.
And of course they couldn't read, so if they want to eat what's that, corned beef? They just open all the cans until they open a can of corned beef and they eat it.
Micronesians were feeling good again and were eager to build a good relationship with their liberators. Children would stand at attention and salute as soldiers passed by. And on many islands, the Star-Spangled Banner was sung for arriving soldiers.
Well, basically, as soon as the war was over and Japan had surrendered, the Japanese, Okinawans, and Koreans who were in Camp Sasupe were all gathered up together, and they brought some freighters down from Japan, and they sent almost all of the Koreans and Japanese and Okinawans back to their homes. There was a residue, maybe 25 or 30 people who were allowed to remain because they were married locally or had some other connection.
On Chuuk, there was still 38,000 Japanese soldiers left over from the war, twice as many as the number of Chuukese. Nearly all were shipped back to Japan by the end of 1945, but approximately 5,000 were held to do cleanup work on the islands.
But when the Japanese lost the war, there was no smooth transition. The Americans came in, and the policy that they carry out was to repatriate all the Japanese. So there were a lot of broken families. In addition to that, the Japanese were the one who run the power plants. They're the one who run the water system. They're the one who teach schools. So when they repatriate all the Japanese, it created a vacuum.
The transition from Japan to the Americans was not a very close one. Everything had to start all over again. The economy, the education, the politics, everything.
Because, you know, you have to remember, the war just ended. All of these guys have been, you know, fighting in the Pacific for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years or maybe more. And they're anxious to go back home.
As such, there was no massive rebuilding effort to replace what the Japanese had built before the war. Temporary naval structures would have to do. In place of the quaint little Japanese shops and houses fronted by twin torii, military-style Quonset huts mushroomed.
They're all over the place. Several stores in Chalankanoa were Quonset huts. I've got a picture of the Marine base in Marpi, which is maybe 1,000 Quonset huts. Because after the invasion, after the islands were secured, there were 100,000 American troops on Saipan for the landing they anticipated on Japan. So Quonset huts all over the place.
There was such plenty in these years that military materiel of all sorts was turned over to the civilian population.
After the war, the Jeeps were sold by the Navy at $5 a piece because we had thousands of them on Tinian. You can see on the 4th of July, guys bring out their Jeeps and parade them. I think there's 10 or 15 of them that are still operating.
But even a $5 Jeep or a $20 Quonset hut cost money. How were Micronesians to earn a living in these early post-war years? For a time, Micronesians turned to selling handicraft and souvenirs to U.S. servicemen.
I work for the handicraft first, my job. And I can weaving the crochet and weaving the bandana, cigarette case. I know how to make a string belt, something like that. And my older brother know the cuffing. He can cuff the man and woman. And we have one handicraft shop. So many of the military coming, officers, military, and they buy all those things.
They sold Marshallese woven baskets and cigarette cases, Pohnpeian dance battles, Chuki's love sticks, and Yapese carved figures. But these new businesses did not last very long. The bulk of the military was shipping out, and as their presence dwindled, islanders had no market for their products.